He threw a fake anniversary party, a complete sham, all designed for a single purpose: to hand me divorce papers in front of everyone we knew. I wanted an audience. He smirked, his voice a low poison in my ear. I managed a smile, pulled out a small box wrapped in velvet, and asked his mother to do the honors. She froze, her eyes darting to him. Then she turned and walked away without a single word. He didn't even try to stop her. The thick manila envelope was cold against the fabric of my dress, a stark contrast to his warm breath on my neck. "Happy anniversary, darling, my husband," Liam murmured, just for me to hear, while 250 of our closest friends and family watched from the ballroom below. The spotlight on us was hot, but his words were a special kind of fire. I wanted a crowd for this. My hands were rock steady when I took the envelope from him. They had no business being so calm. Any other wife would have crumbled on that ridiculous stage he had built specifically for our 7th anniversary celebration. But I wasn't just any other wife anymore. "You orchestrated all of this," I said, my voice low but unwavering, a stark contrast to the frantic pounding in my ears. Before we get to the good part, I just want to take a moment and thank you for being here, for listening to these stories about women who refuse to be walked all over. If you're someone who believes that truth and integrity should always win out over lies and manipulation, consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps us bring this message of strength to more people who need to hear it. Okay, let's watch the fireworks. His smile was pure venom, a perfect frame for his professionally whitened teeth. Every last detail, the roses, the vintage champagne, the guest list, right down to that emerald dress you're wearing. I always loved how it made your eyes sparkle. He let out a soft chuckle that sent a shiver down my spine. "I wanted you to look absolutely perfect when I brought you to your knees." The crowd below was a sea of shocked faces and glowing smartphone screens. I heard a sudden sharp gasp. Somewhere, a champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. But the only thing I could hear was the echo of Liam's confession. He had engineered this entire night just to humiliate me in front of our entire world. 7 years, I whispered, my eyes fixed on the legal documents in my hand. 7 years of marriage, and this is how you choose to end it. This is how you make an exit, Mia, with a statement, with a crowd. You create a moment people will never forget. He straightened his bow tie, puffing out his chest as if he'd just won an Oscar. They'll be talking about this for years. And then I saw her, Ashley Reed, trying to disappear into the shadows behind a massive marble pillar at the back of the ballroom. But her platinum blonde hair was a dead giveaway, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. She was anxiously chewing on her lower lip, her gaze fixed on Liam with an expression of such sickening adoration it made my stomach lurch. She was in on it. She knew this was coming all along. "How long?" I asked, my grip tightening on the envelope. "How long what? How long have you been planning to serve me divorce papers at our anniversary party? How long have you been sleeping with your director of marketing? How long have you been lying to my face every single day?" For a fraction of a second, Liam's smug mask slipped. It was just a flicker, but it was enough. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. He recovered quickly, his training as a lawyer kicking in. That's not really relevant at this point, is it? The point is, our marriage is over. Irreconcilable differences, you get it. You'll get half of everything, of course. A very generous settlement for 7 years of companionship. He was trying to steer the narrative, to cast himself as the magnanimous husband and me as the jilted gold digger. He had absolutely no idea what was about to hit him. I had spent the last 4 months uncovering a secret he never even knew he was keeping. A scandal buried for over 30 years, back when his mother, Eleanor Hayes, had a passionate affair with her husband's business partner. The DNA test results proved that Liam was not Jonathan Hayes' biological son, and therefore he had no legal right to the massive Hayes family fortune. Liam had built his entire identity, his entire life, on a foundation of lies. His name, his inheritance, his social standing, it was all a house of cards. And I was about to pull the bottom one out. I reached into my clutch purse, my fingers closing around the small velvet box I had placed there earlier. The box contained photocopies of every single damning piece of evidence my investigator, Simon, had found. It also held a handwritten letter I discovered among Eleanor's things when she was in the hospital a few months back. A letter she had written to her husband confessing everything. A letter she never had the courage to send. "You're right, Liam," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, carrying across the silent ballroom. "People will be talking about this for a very, very long time." I stepped away from him, turning to face the ocean of guests. 250 people, friends, family, business associates, and socialites had come expecting to toast another year of the Hayes' seemingly perfect marriage. They were about to get a far more interesting show, the complete and total implosion of a man who was nothing but a fraud. But before we continue, I announced, descending the stage with my chin held high, "I have a gift I'd like to present." I moved through the crowd, which parted for me like the Red Sea. I ignored the frantic whispers and shocked stares, my eyes fixed on the front row where Eleanor Hayes sat, looking like she'd been turned to stone. Liam's mother looked like she had just seen a ghost, and in a way, she had. The ghost of her buried past had finally come to collect. "Eleanor," I said softly, holding the velvet box out to her. My smile felt sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Would you mind opening this for me? I think you'll recognize what's inside." Her face went pale, the color of old porcelain. Her hands trembled as she reached for the box, and I saw the exact moment the horrifying truth dawned on her. Behind me, Liam's voice was a whip crack. "Mia, what in the hell do you think you're doing? Be quiet, Liam," I said, without even turning to look at him. "For once in your self-important life, just shut up and let someone else have the spotlight." The small box felt like it weighed 100 pounds in Eleanor's shaking hands. 250 people held their breath, their phones recording every agonizing second as she struggled with the satin ribbon, her fingers so stiff they looked like they might snap. This was it. The moment Liam's perfect world was about to be reduced to ash. The moment I showed him what real revenge looked like. Eleanor's fingers worked as if she were disarming a bomb, every slight movement a risk. The ribbon finally fell away, and she peered into the box as if it held a coiled viper. Inside was a single folded letter, its paper yellowed and creased from decades of hiding. Her handwriting, her confession. "No," she breathed, a sound so quiet only those of us in the front row heard it. But the lapel microphone Liam had insisted on wearing for his grand speech caught every single sound. Her denial echoed through the ballroom, a futile prayer sent up to a god who wasn't listening. I watched her unfold the paper with the slow, deliberate care of a bomb technician, because that's what it was. A 30-year-old bomb, ready to detonate in the most public way imaginable. "Read it, Eleanor," I said, my voice gentle but firm, filled with an authority I didn't know I possessed. "Read it out loud. Let everyone hear what you wrote to your husband all those years ago." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a lifetime of terror. "Please, Mia, don't do this. Not in front of everyone." "Do what?" Liam's voice cut through the tension, thick with annoyance. He had jumped off the stage and was now marching toward us, his face a thundercloud of fury. "What is all this drama, Mother? What is in that letter?" Eleanor's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The letter trembled in her hand, and I saw tears welling in her eyes, tears she had probably held back for 3 decades. "She can't read it," I said, stepping forward to block Liam's path. "Because it destroys everything you think you are, everything you've built your entire life on." "Mia, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but this isn't a game, Liam. It's the truth. I know that's a concept you're not very familiar with." Eleanor's voice was as fragile as a dried autumn leaf. "My dearest Jonathan," she began, her words barely audible. The entire room leaned in, a forest of phones held high, straining to capture every syllable. "I can't carry this burden by myself any longer. What I'm about to confess will change everything, and I can only pray that you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." Liam froze. "Mother, stop." But Eleanor was too far gone. The dam had broken, and 30 years of guilt came flooding out. The winter of 1996 was the loneliest I've ever been. You were always traveling for the firm, and I felt like a ghost in our home. When Mark returned from Chicago, when he looked at me like I was actually there, her voice broke. "I made a mistake that has haunted me every day since." The name hit Liam like a physical blow. Mark Peterson, his father's old business partner, the man who had been a sort of uncle to him when he was a boy, the man who had suddenly moved to Arizona when Liam was young and was never mentioned again. "You had an affair," Liam stated, his voice hollow as his legal mind began connecting the dots he desperately wanted to ignore. Eleanor nodded, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "For 3 months. 3 months of feeling seen, of feeling alive." And then she pressed a hand to her mouth, choking back a sob. "Then I discovered I was pregnant." The ballroom was dead silent, the only sounds the soft clicks of phone cameras and someone's panicked breathing nearby. 250 people were watching the live demolition of a city dynasty. "You told Dad the baby was his," Liam said, his voice empty. "I was so scared," Eleanor continued reading, her voice finding a tiny sliver of strength. The timing was close enough. Jonathan had been home for a weekend in February. I told myself it could be his child. I wanted it to be his child. Liam's face was ashen, but you knew it wasn't. "The doctor who delivered you," Eleanor whispered, looking directly at her son. "Dr. Miller. He was Mark's cousin. He knew about us. Mark had confessed everything to him, consumed by guilt. When you were born, when he saw the blood work..." She swallowed, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. "He came to me privately. He told me the tests proved you couldn't be Jonathan's son. So you paid him off," I said, filling in the blanks I'd learned from Simon's investigation. "You gave him money to change the official records." Eleanor nodded, her face a mask of misery. $75,000. It was money from my grandmother's estate. Dr. Miller changed the blood type on the birth certificate, falsified some notes to make it look like a simple clerical error in the lab. He promised no one would ever find out. Liam stumbled backward as if he'd been shot. My entire life, my name, my inheritance, my place in this family, it's all a lie. "I thought I was giving you the life you deserved," Eleanor pleaded, her voice cracking. "The Hayes name, the social standing, the security. How could I take all of that away from an innocent baby? By lying to everyone." Liam roared, his composure finally shattering into a million pieces. "By lying to Dad, to me, to the entire world." But Eleanor wasn't finished. She looked down at the letter one last time, and I saw her brace herself for the final devastating blow, the one I had been waiting for. "There's more," she said quietly. Liam let out a bitter, broken laugh. "More? How could there possibly be more?" Eleanor's eyes met mine across the small space between us, and for a split second, I saw something that looked almost like gratitude. She knew this secret had been a poison in her veins for 30 years. I had just handed her the antidote, even if it looked like a bomb to everyone else. "I wrote this letter 7 years ago," she continued, her voice gaining power, "the night before your wedding. I was going to tell Jonathan everything, confess it all, and let the consequences be what they may. But then I met Mia." Liam's head whipped toward me, his eyes a battleground of confusion and rage. "She was so kind to me that day," Eleanor said, her voice softening. "In the midst of all the wedding madness, When everyone was fussing over florists and caterers, she noticed I was overwhelmed. She brought me a cup of tea, sat with me, and asked me about my life. She really asked. Not the polite, surface-level questions I was used to, but with genuine interest. I remembered that afternoon. Eleanor had seemed lost in the hurricane of wedding preparations, sitting by herself while Liam worked the room. Over the past 7 years, Eleanor went on, Mia has been the daughter I never had. She called me every single week without fail. She visited me in the hospital when I had my heart scare last year. She remembered my birthday when my own son forgot. She looked after me when nobody else bothered. Liam's face twisted into a new, ugly shape. So what, Mother? So what if she was nice to you? That doesn't change what you did. Eleanor looked straight at him, and for the first time all night, her voice was as clear and sharp as a bell. No, it doesn't change what I did, but it changes what I should have done. Because watching Mia for the last 7 years, seeing her integrity, her strength, her compassion. She paused, gathering her strength for the final execution. It made me realize that you, Liam, are nothing like the man who raised you. You're selfish, you're cruel, and you are a small, petty man. You inherited your biological father's worst traits and none of Jonathan's best. The letter slipped from her fingers and floated to the floor as Eleanor stood up, her voice rising to fill every corner of the vast ballroom. Mia is the child I wish I'd had. She has more character in her little finger than you have shown in your entire miserable life. Liam stood there, frozen, his mouth hanging open as 250 people witnessed the complete and utter annihilation of his entire identity. And I smiled. The silence that hung in the air after Eleanor's declaration lasted for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then, the ballroom didn't erupt, it started to buzz. It wasn't the sound of shock or applause, but something far more damaging. The low, electric hum of 250 people processing a high society scandal in real time. Conversation sparked like wildfires spreading from table to table as the full weight of what they had just seen began to sink in. Did she really say, not his biological father, 30 years of lies, an illegitimate heir? The whispers grew in volume and confidence. I watched as people's expressions shifted. They were no longer just guests at a party. They were witnesses to the public dismantling of one of the city's most prominent family names. Margaret Whitmore, a woman who had greeted me with gushing affection just an hour earlier, now stared at Liam as if he were a common criminal who had crashed her daughter's debutante ball. The smear of her crimson lipstick on her champagne glass was forgotten. "This can't be real," someone mumbled behind me. "The Hayes family helped found the yacht club. They've been pillars of this community for generations." "Apparently not," a sharp voice replied. "Apparently they've been running a massive con for 30 years. Liam remained at the center of it all, a statue in a bespoke tuxedo, his face a flickering montage of emotions. Disbelief, rage, shame, and utter desperation. Each one washed over his features before being replaced by the next. His perfectly styled hair was now disheveled, his bow tie crooked. The golden boy facade was cracking right before our eyes. But what truly fascinated me was the crowd's reaction. These were the people who had orbited Liam for years, desperate to catch a bit of the glow from his inherited status and wealth. Now they looked at him as if he had personally defrauded every single one of them, which, in a way, he had. Richard Blackstone, Liam's biggest client, was already making a swift exit, his wife scurrying behind him, her heels clicking in urgent retreat on the marble floor. They didn't even bother with a backward glance. In their world, being near a scandal was just as toxic as being in one. "Liam," Blackstone's voice boomed across the room just before he vanished through the doors. "My office will be in touch on Monday to discuss our contract." The message was crystal clear. The Blackstone account worth millions a year was gone. I saw a group of Liam's old college friends huddled near the bar, the same men who had been his groomsmen at our wedding, the ones who were fixtures at every holiday party. They were now subtly backing away from the scene as if it were a chemical spill. "We should go," one of them whispered, but the lapel mic Liam was still wearing broadcasted it to the entire room. "This is going to be all over social media in an hour." "It already is," another said, holding up his phone. "Someone's live streaming. It has over 5,000 viewers, and it's still climbing. Live streaming, of course." In today's world, there was no such thing as a private humiliation. Liam's downfall was being broadcast for the entire world to enjoy. But the person I was really watching was in the back corner, where she had been trying to merge with the wallpaper all night. Ashley Reed, Liam's blonde ambition, had turned the color of chalk. Her sparkling dress, which had looked so glamorous before, now just seemed cheap and desperate. She had probably imagined this night as her grand entrance, the moment she would finally be introduced as the future Mrs. Hayes. Instead, she looked like she wanted the ground to open up and swallow her. I watched her clutch her purse as the new reality hit her like a tidal wave. The man she'd been sleeping with wasn't the heir to a great fortune. He was the illegitimate son from a 30-year-old affair. The inheritance she was counting on had vanished into thin air. The social status she craved was built on a foundation of lies. Her phone buzzed in her hand, probably a text from a friend asking if she was at that party that was blowing up online. I saw her read the message, saw her face collapse, and saw her take one final lingering look at Liam, still standing there, utterly lost in his expensive suit, before she turned and walked toward the exit. She didn't run. That would draw too much attention. She moved with the careful, deliberate pace of someone trying to become invisible. Head down, shoulders slumped, her designer purse held in front of her like a shield. But I saw her, and more importantly, Liam saw her. His head snapped around, his eyes locking onto her retreating back. For a moment, a look of pure, raw desperation crossed his face, the look of a drowning man watching his only life raft float away. "Ashley," he called out, his voice thin and cracking. She paused at the ballroom doors but didn't turn around. The entire room's attention followed his gaze, 250 pairs of eyes landing on the woman who, just hours before, was his secret lover. Now she was just another guest fleeing the disaster zone. She disappeared through the doors without a sound, leaving Liam standing there with one hand half raised, looking like the complete and utter fool he had always been. That was the cue for the mass exodus to begin. The Hendersons slipped out, followed by the Carruthers family. Then went Liam's golfing buddies, his business contacts, and all the social climbers who had been so desperate to be in his orbit. They vanished like mist in the morning sun. Some offered weak excuses. Early flight, the sitters waiting. Most just disappeared, unwilling to be associated with such a spectacular social implosion. But the most cutting departures came from those who had been closest to him. Marcus Webb, his best man, caught Liam's eye from across the room and gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head before turning his back and walking away. The message couldn't have been clearer. A lifelong friendship ended with a single gesture. The Preston family, our neighbors who had been like surrogate grandparents to Liam, gathered their coats with a grim silence that said everything. Mrs. Preston had taught Liam how to ride his first bike. Now she couldn't even look at him. Within 15 minutes, the grand ballroom was 2/3 empty. The few who remained weren't staying out of loyalty. They were the vultures, lingering to pick over the remains of the carcass. Through it all, I stood perfectly still. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I simply watched the man who had tried to ruin me experience what true ruin felt like. The champagne in my glass had gone flat, but I took a sip anyway. It tasted like justice. Mrs. Gable approached me then, her kind, wrinkled face full of concern. She had been my neighbor when I was growing up, long before I ever became a Hayes. "Dear," she said gently, taking my free hand in hers, "are you all right?" For the first time all night, my smile was genuine. "I'm perfect, Mrs. Gable. Thank you for asking." She gave my hand a knowing squeeze, nodded once, and walked away. That was my cue. I had seen what I came to see. Now I just wanted to go home and pour myself a real drink, one that didn't taste of deceit. I set my empty glass on a passing tray, picked up my clutch, and walked toward the exit without a single glance back. Behind me, Liam's voice echoed in the cavernous, nearly empty room. "Mia, wait! Mia!" But I didn't wait. He wanted an audience for my ending. Now he had one for his. The valet brought my car around as I stood under the hotel's grand entrance, breathing in the cool night air that smelled of freedom. Through the massive glass windows behind me, I could see the last few guests lingering in the ballroom, picking over the gossip of the evening. I was done with that world. My phone was buzzing relentlessly. Texts, missed calls, social media notifications. The scandal was already a raging fire, spreading far beyond the ballroom and into the digital world where shame lives forever. I silenced it and dropped it into my purse. This night was for me. The drive home through the quiet city streets felt surreal. The streetlights cast long, golden shadows, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. I rolled down the windows, letting the wind whip through my hair, not caring in the slightest that it was destroying the perfect hairstyle Liam had once complimented. When I pulled into our driveway, my driveway, I corrected myself. The house was a dark, imposing silhouette against the moonlit sky. The sprawling estate that Liam loved to show off, with its manicured gardens and imported Italian marble, would soon be just another line item in a messy, legal battle. I kicked off my heels the moment I stepped into the foyer and walked barefoot across the cold marble to the kitchen. The silence in the house felt different now, not empty, but full of promise. The house itself seemed to be waiting to see what I would do next. I went into Liam's study and poured myself 3 fingers of the 30-year-old single malt he kept locked away for special occasions. This definitely qualified. The whiskey was a smooth, satisfying burn. I sank into the leather armchair that faced the large window overlooking the gardens. Outside, the security lights cast everything in sharp, dramatic relief, like a scene from an old movie. My phone rang. Liam's custom ringtone. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, and a 3rd time. On the 4th call, my curiosity got the better of me. I answered, but said nothing. "Mia, thank God." His voice was shredded, raw with panic. "Where are you? We have to talk. This is insane. You can't possibly believe what my mother said. She's been having memory issues. Her doctors said stress can trigger delusions. Liam." My voice was as calm and still as a frozen lake. "Stop. You have to listen to me. I know you're angry about the divorce papers, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... Where are you calling from?" The simple question seemed to throw him. "What? I'm still at the hotel, in the parking garage. Everyone's gone, Mia. Everyone. Even the valets won't make eye contact with me." I took another sip of his very expensive scotch. "Good." "Good? What do you mean, good? My entire life just blew up on a live stream. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to me? To my career? To your inheritance?" I finished for him, my voice soft. A heavy silence stretched across the line. "You knew," he finally whispered. "You knew before tonight. I've known the truth for months, Liam, about Mark Peterson, about the falsified birth certificate, about Dr. Miller and the $75,000 he took to bury the truth." I paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. "About all of it. How? Your blood work from your executive physical in April. B negative, remember. But both your parents are O positive. Even you must remember enough high school biology to know that's a genetic impossibility." I heard his sharp intake of breath, and I knew he was remembering the moment he'd joked about being the mailman's son because the blood types didn't match. If only he'd known how close he was to the truth. "So you hired someone," he said, his voice flat and defeated. "You investigated my family, I investigated my husband. Because when the person you're married to starts acting like a complete stranger, you either learn to live with the lies or you go looking for the truth. I chose the truth. And this was your revenge? To destroy me in public? I stood and walked to the window, watching the shadows of the trees dance on the lawn. No, Liam, this was justice. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted an audience for my destruction. So I gave you an audience for yours. But you could have just told me. We could have handled this privately, like adults. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Adults? You mean like serving your wife divorce papers on a stage at her own anniversary party? Like sleeping with your subordinate for months while telling me you loved me every night? Like planning to take half of everything I brought into this marriage so you could start a new life with a woman half your age? He had no answer. There was no answer. The difference between you and me, Liam, is that I only destroyed things that were never real to begin with. Your name, your inheritance, your reputation, it was all a sham. You've been playing a role in someone else's life for over 30 years. Mia, please. I made a mistake, but you didn't make a mistake. You made choices. Every lie, every betrayal, every act of cruelty. You chose all of it. Through the phone, I could hear the distant slam of a car door. The last of the hotel staff finally going home. Liam was alone in that concrete tomb, just as he would be for the rest of his life. My mother, he said suddenly. You said you found that letter in her things. You went through her private belongings. You stole from her. I was bringing her a fresh set of clothes at the hospital, remember? During her heart surgery scare in May, you were too busy with your director of marketing to even visit your own mother. The memory still stung. The letter fell out of a book she was reading. I didn't steal it, Liam. I found it. And after 7 years of watching you take credit for Jonathan's legacy, of watching you treat people like disposable objects, I decided it was time someone finally knew the truth. So you decided to play God with my life? No. I decided to stop playing the victim in mine. The silence was longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small, almost like a child's. What happens now? Now you get to find out who you really are. Not Jonathan Hayes' son, not the heir to a fortune you never earned, and not my husband. Whoever is left after all of that is stripped away. And us? There is no us, Liam. There hasn't been for a very long time. Tonight was just the public announcement. I could hear his shallow breathing on the other end of the line, the faint whoosh of cars from a nearby highway. He was sitting in his luxury car in an empty parking garage, still wearing his tuxedo, trying to figure out how his perfect plan had gone so horribly wrong. I'm filing the divorce papers tomorrow, I said softly, under my maiden name, Carter. The name you always said sounded so plain, so ordinary. Turns out it's the only real thing in this entire marriage. Mia. Goodbye, Liam. I ended the call and turned the phone off completely. Outside, a car turned onto our street, its headlights sweeping across the window before it disappeared into the darkness. I finished the last of the whiskey and set the empty glass on the table. Tomorrow, the real work of untangling 7 years of shared assets and shared lies would begin. But tonight, I would sleep alone, in my own bed, in my own house, with my own name. And for the first time in a very long time, that sounded like peace. The first night I slept alone in that bed, I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, letting myself trace the path from love to ruin. It didn't start with the lies or the affair, but with the moment I stopped being a fool. It was a Thursday in April when Liam came home from his corporate health screening, waving the lab report like a trophy. "Perfect bill of health," he declared, tossing the papers onto the kitchen island before heading upstairs to shower. "Doctor says I have the heart of a 20-year-old. I was stirring a pot of risotto, barely listening, when something on the page caught my eye. Blood type, B negative. I froze, the spoon hovering over the pan. That night, with Liam snoring beside me, I pulled out our wedding album. I flipped past pages of posed smiles until I found the one I was looking for. Liam, flanked by his parents at the reception, all three laughing at some forgotten joke. Jonathan Hayes' eyes were a gentle, warm brown. Eleanor's were the same, a deep, rich chocolate. But Liam's eyes had always been a startling, bright green. I had taken enough high school science to know the basics. Two brown-eyed parents can't produce a green-eyed child without a very specific and statistically rare recessive gene combination. Add the blood type mismatch. Two O-positive parents cannot have a B-negative child, and the probability fell from unlikely to impossible. But families kept secrets. Perhaps he was adopted. Maybe there was a simple explanation that was just never discussed. Except Liam had always been intensely proud of his Hayes lineage. He wore it like a family crest, constantly alluding to his good genes and his direct connection to the family's success. Surely, if he were adopted, he would know. The questions gnawed at me for weeks. I started scrutinizing old family photos, searching for resemblances that weren't there. Liam had Eleanor's determined jawline, perhaps, but that could be a coincidence. His height was similar to Jonathan's, but so were half the men in their social circle. I told myself I was being ridiculous, inventing drama where none existed. That's what I repeated every morning as Liam kissed me goodbye on his way to another important day at the office. But then I found the photograph. I was cleaning out Jonathan's old study, a task Eleanor had avoided since his death. Tucked away in a file cabinet behind old tax returns, I found a manila folder filled with photos from Liam's childhood. One of them made the air leave my lungs. It was Liam at about 8 years old standing next to a tall man with dark hair and piercing green eyes, the exact same shade as Liam's. The man's hand was on Liam's shoulder with an easy familiarity, and they were both grinning at the camera as if they shared a private joke. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "Liam and Uncle Mark, Christmas 1998. Uncle Mark, Mark Peterson, Jonathan's former business partner who had abruptly moved to Arizona when Liam was a child. The man Eleanor never mentioned, whose name would cause her to change the subject instantly. I sat in that dusty study for 2 hours, staring at that single photograph, feeling the foundations of my world crumble. The following Monday, I hired Simon Finch. Simon was recommended by my lawyer friend, Maria. I told her I needed a discreet background check for a potential estate manager. He was quiet, meticulous, and expensive enough to be good at his job. "I need you to investigate my husband's parentage," I told him at our first meeting in a quiet coffee shop. "Specifically, I need to know if Jonathan Hayes was his biological father." Simon didn't even raise an eyebrow. "Any particular reason for the inquiry?" Medical discrepancies, a blood type mismatch, and a photograph that asks a lot of questions. I need this kept completely and utterly confidential. For 6 weeks, Simon patiently unraveled 30 years of deception. He found the original hospital records from Liam's birth, the ones showing his true blood type before Dr. Miller altered them. He located a retired nurse who remembered the delivery and being told to keep certain details private. He tracked down Mark Peterson in Scottsdale, where he'd been living quietly for decades. Most importantly, he found Eleanor's letter. She had stashed it in a safe deposit box, along with other sensitive documents, under her maiden name. The box was opened the same week Liam was born. Simon had a contact at the bank who owed him a favor. The letter confirmed everything I suspected, and more. Eleanor's affair with Mark had lasted all winter. She had been in love with him, had even planned to leave Jonathan until the pregnancy sent her into a panic. Reading those pages was like listening to a soul unburden its darkest secrets. She wrote about paying off Dr. Miller, about convincing Mark to vanish, about lying to her husband every single day. She wrote about watching Liam grow up, knowing he was a living lie. But the most devastating part was the end, where she admitted that keeping the secret wasn't about protecting Liam. It was about protecting herself, her reputation, her marriage, her comfortable life. Simon delivered the file to me on a rainy Thursday, complete with DNA evidence that confirmed it all. Liam was not a Hayes. He never had been. "What are you going to do with this?" Simon asked as I signed his final invoice. "I'm not sure yet," I lied. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. The plan took shape slowly over the next few months. I started spending more time with Eleanor, visiting her weekly, bringing her favorite teas, and listening to her stories. She was lonely and responded to the attention like a wilting flower given water. I helped organize her affairs, drove her to appointments, and sat by her bedside during her hospital stay for heart surgery in May. Liam was too busy with Ashley, to notice his wife was becoming his mother's confidant. Eleanor started to confide in me. "Mark always said Liam had his eyes," she murmured one afternoon. "I used to worry people would notice." "When did Mark leave?" I asked casually. "When Liam was about 5. Right after Jonathan made him a partner. The timing was perfect, really. Too perfect." She was testing me, I realized, probing to see how much I knew, how much I could be trusted with. The final piece fell into place during her recovery. The medication made her drowsy and unguarded. One evening, as I helped her with her pajamas, she grabbed my arm. "He was never supposed to find out," she whispered, her eyes unfocused. "I promised Mark, but watching you, you're so kind. You're the daughter I should have had, not the son I lied for." Driving home that night, I made my decision. Liam wanted to end our marriage with an audience? Fine. He would get the biggest audience of his life. But the show wasn't going to follow his script. I let him plan the party. I smiled and nodded at his cruel little jokes. I even helped him pick out his tuxedo. All the while, I was preparing my own production. The velvet-wrapped box. The precise timing. The moment Eleanor would have no choice but to detonate the secret she'd guarded for 30 years. Liam thought he was directing my downfall. In reality, he was just building the stage for his own. 3 months later, I was standing on a small wooden dock, dipping my bare feet into a cool mountain stream. The cabin I'd rented sat behind me, all weathered wood and a screen door that slammed shut with the most satisfying sound imaginable. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a porch facing the sunrise. It was the complete antithesis of my old life. I had found this place by accident, driving aimlessly after signing the final divorce papers. The owner, a woman named Ruth, didn't ask any questions. "Last person who lived here was a painter," she'd said. "Some folks find this much quiet unnerving." "It's perfect," I'd replied. The first morning, I woke up disoriented by the silence. No traffic, no neighbors, no 6 a.m. phone calls for Liam. Just birdsong and the rush of the stream. I sat on the porch in my pajamas, drank coffee that tasted like coffee, and cried. Not from sadness, but from sheer relief. My phone had been silent for weeks, except for occasional updates from my lawyer, Maria. Liam had called 7 times in the first month. I blocked his number after the 4th silent voicemail. Maria's texts painted a grim picture. Resigned from the firm, one read. Partners were going to oust him anyway. Apartment downtown, came another. Leased under the name Mark Peterson. Guess he's trying to own it. Ashley filed a restraining order. He was just standing outside her office building for 2 weeks. Just watching. I read each update while tending to the small vegetable garden I'd planted, feeling only a distant clinical curiosity. It was like reading the epilogue of a book I'd long since finished. The most surprising text arrived last week. Eleanor changed her will. Everything is going to the Children's Cancer Institute and something called the Mia Carter Scholarship Fund. Liam gets nothing, not even the family photos. A scholarship fund in my name. Eleanor's final act. Perhaps her apology for the lies that had entangled us all. The legal fallout had been swift. Liam Hayes was now legally Liam Peterson. The Hayes family trust, with no living heirs, would be dissolved. The money wasn't what destroyed him, though. It was the silence. Maria mentioned it on a call. He thinks people are still talking about him. But honestly, they've moved on. That senator's affair, the tech CEO's indictment. Your story was a flash in the pan. That should have been a comfort to him, but apparently, he couldn't let it go. He showed up at the country club, she told me, just sat at the bar for hours. Someone finally asked if he was okay, and he just said, "They remember." But no one was even looking at him. I rarely thought about him anymore. My days were filled with the simple rhythm of the sun and the seasons. I hiked, I read, I learned the names of the wildflowers that grew along the stream. I'd kept 3 friends from my old life, Maria, Mrs. Gable, and Carmen, Eleanor's hospice nurse. The rest of that social circle had simply faded away. Carmen visited sometimes, bringing news from a world that felt increasingly alien. That blonde girl from the party she mentioned on her last visit. Ashley? She moved back to Ohio, deleted all her social media. Good for her, I'd said, and I meant it. And your ex-husband, Carmen had continued, he's been asking about you, where you went, how you are, like he can't understand why you just vanished. I had smiled then, a real smile. That's because he never knew who I was to begin with. The cabin had no online footprint. I had deleted my accounts the day I moved in, and it felt like shedding a heavy coat. All those years curating a perfect life for an audience that didn't matter. Liam would never understand this kind of peace. His whole identity was built on being seen. The idea that someone could find happiness in anonymity was a language he couldn't speak, which is why my silence was the most perfect revenge of all. He wanted an audience for my humiliation. Instead, I gave him an audience for his annihilation, and then I simply walked out of the theater. Now he was playing to an empty house, and I was, for the first time in a very long time, free. If this story of calculated revenge had you absolutely hooked, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Mia handed Eleanor that velvet-wrapped box, knowing exactly what would unfold next. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.